Have you ever heard of the lost books of the Bible? It sounds like something straight out of an adventure movie, doesn't it? A collection of hidden texts, ancient secrets, and stories that didn't quite make it into the final cut of the Bible we know today. But what are these books, really? Are they lost treasures? Dangerous heresies? Or just old documents? Let's unravel this historical and theological mystery together. First, let's get one thing straight. The term lost books is a bit of a misnomer. For the most part, these texts aren't lost at all. We have copies of them. Academics study them, and you can find translations of them online or in bookstores. A more accurate term would be non-canonical books, which means they weren't included in the official, final list or canon of the Bible. So, why weren't they included? The process of assembling the Bible was long and complex, spanning centuries. Different communities of faith had different collections of sacred writings. Over time, religious leaders and councils came together to decide which books would form the official canon. They had specific criteria. They asked questions like, was this book written by an apostle or someone close to an apostle? Was it widely accepted and used by churches? Did its teachings align with the core message of the faith that was already established? Many texts simply didn't meet this criteria. Let's take a famous example, the Gospel of Thomas. And like the four canonical Gospels Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospel of Thomas isn't a narrative of Jesus' life. Instead, it's a collection of over 100 sayings attributed to him. While some of these sayings are similar to what's in the Bible, others are very different and reflect a Gnostic worldview. Gnosticism was a belief system in the early Christian centuries that saw the material world as evil and salvation as something achieved through secret knowledge, or gnosis. This was a major departure from mainstream Christian teaching, which is a key reason why the Gospel of Thomas and other Gnostic texts were rejected. Then there are books like the Book of Enoch. This one is fascinating because it's actually quoted in the New Testament and the Epistle of Jude. The Book of Enoch is an apocalyptic work filled with visions of heaven, angels, demons, and the end of the world. It was very popular in some early Jewish and Christian circles. However, its authorship was uncertain, and its elaborate cosmology and angelology were considered by many to be too speculative and went far beyond what was taught in the core scriptures. So, despite its influence, it was left out of most Jewish and Christian canons, with the notable exception of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which considers it part of its official scripture to this day. Another group of books you'll often hear about is the Apocrypha, or the Deuterocanonical books. This is a collection of texts, including books like Tobit, Judith, and 1st and 2nd Maccabees. These are historical and wisdom writings from the period between the Old and New Testaments. Here's where it gets interesting. The Catholic and Orthodox churches consider these books to be deuterocanonical, meaning a second canon, and they include them in their Bibles. They see them as divinely inspired scripture. However, Protestant traditions generally refer to them as the Apocrypha, meaning hidden things, and while they consider them historically valuable and good for reading, they don't see them as having the same divine authority as the canonical books. This disagreement goes back to the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century. So, you can see there isn't one single reason why a book was left out. Some, like the Gospel of Thomas, were excluded because their theology was radically different. Others, like the Book of Enoch, were seen as too fantastical or of questionable origin. And still others, like the books of the Apocrypha, are accepted by some major Christian denominations but not by others. The story of the biblical canon is a story of debate, community consensus, and theological criteria. There are also books that are just plain forgeries, written centuries after the apostles under false names to lend them authority. These are called pseudepigrapha, meaning false writings. For instance, there's the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, not to be confused with the Sayings Gospel we mentioned earlier. This book tells fantastical stories about the boy Jesus, like him making clay birds and bringing them to life. While they might be interesting to read, early church leaders quickly recognized these as later fictional accounts that didn't align with the dignified portrayal of Jesus in the canonical Gospels. So, Are these lost books worth reading? Absolutely. Just not necessarily as divine scripture, depending on your tradition. Reading them gives us an incredible window into the ancient world. They show us the diverse beliefs and ideas that were circulating during the early centuries of Judaism and Christianity. They reveal the questions people were asking and the different ways they tried to answer them. They help us understand the historical context in which the Bible was formed and why certain books were ultimately chosen. Think of it this way: the Bible is like a curated art exhibit. The curators in this case, early church councils, carefully selected the pieces they felt best represented the story they wanted to tell, based on a specific set of standards. The lost books are like the rest of the art from that period. Some of it might be practice sketches, some might be from a completely different artistic movement, and some might be masterpieces in their own right that just didn't fit the theme of this particular exhibit. Looking at all of it gives you a much richer and more complete picture of the art scene at the time. Exploring these non-canonical texts isn't about undermining the Bible. For many scholars and believers, it's about enriching their understanding of it. It highlights the journey of how a collection of diverse writings became the single most influential book in human history. Right, the process wasn't simple or instantaneous. It was a deeply human and spiritual process of discernment that unfolded over generations. The lost books aren't a secret to be feared, but a historical conversation to be explored, reminding us that the story of faith is always deeper and more complex than we might think. Thanks so much for watching and exploring this piece of history with me. If you found this interesting, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into fascinating topics. See you next time.